Officer Sunset, this is Collision Warship Archer. We are acknowledging and accepting you. Detective Cousteau, this is Collision Warship Archer. We are acknowledging and accepting you. Lieutenant Dubois, this is Collision Warship Archer. We are acknowledging and accepting you. Firewalker, this is Collision Warship Archer. We are acknowledging and accepting you. Please be advised that you are speaking on a public frequency. What is your request? This is Warship Archer. We are acknowledging and accepting you. Though we're still getting quite a bit of interference. Officer Sunset, please repeat. Your signal is very weak. Detective Cousteau, please repeat. Your signal is very weak. Lieutenant Dubois, please repeat. Your signal is very weak. Firewalker, please repeat. Your signal is very weak. Nothing important. Bad connection. Going to update the receiving frequency. You are currently speaking with Collision Warship Archer, flagship of Insurcom forces in Revachol. No, the captain of the Archer is deeply classified intelligence. We are the second signaler. Our name is not important. All you need to know is that we hold the position of second signaler aboard the Archer. Because it's standard practice for signalers to use the pluralis officialis during the course of our duties. It's meant to serve as a reminder that we don't speak only for ourselves. For instance, as second signaler, we represent Collision Warship Archer, which in turn represents Insurcom and the Collision more generally, which in turn represents the Moralist International, which itself represents the interests of 1.2 billion people across the world. No, of course not. There are many nations outside the Moral Inter's umbrella, in Seoul, Samara, and elsewhere. At most, you might say the Moral Inter represents between a quarter and a third of humanity. Perhaps you could say that we represent the interests and hopes of a great many people. But you could say, just as easily, that we are the assistant to the secretary of a factotum. No more remarkable than the lowest cashier of a common fleet. It all depends on your perspective. The chief signaler, our superior. They are ultimately responsible for all communications aboard the Archer. Why? The Archer itself. That's true. The Moral Inter generally supports efforts to reduce public drunkenness. Actually, we don't even have fleet where we're from. In Messina, they're called Averros. That's true. The Moral Inter generally supports anti-smoking initiatives. Actually, we don't even have fleet where we're from. In Messina, they're called Averros. If by fun stuff you mean alcohol and cigarettes, that's true. Actually, we don't even have fleet where we're from. In Messina, they're called Averros. But now, we've wandered quite far afield. What was your request? It's an important responsibility, but we don't consider it any greater than those borne by countless people all across the world. It may be a demanding job, but the Coalition is committed to ensuring those in its service maintain a healthy work-life balance. Now, your request? Really, it's not important. We would strongly prefer that you state a request. Do we sound like we're from Sir Laclet to you? How did you know that? We don't believe there is anyone younger than 17 named Eleonora. You are 100% wrong. Now, please dispense with the games, Officer Sunset. This is a public frequency. Now, please dispense with the games, Detective Cousteau. This is a public frequency. Now, please dispense with the games, Lieutenant Dubois. This is a public frequency. Now, please dispense with the games, Firewalker. This is a public frequency. We don't appreciate whatever game you're playing, Officer Sunset. Now, what is your request? We don't appreciate whatever game you're playing, Detective Cousteau. Now, what is your request? We don't appreciate whatever game you're playing, Lieutenant Dubois. Now, what is your request? We don't appreciate whatever game you're playing, Firewalker. Now, what is your request? It's a great honor and responsibility. In addition to monitoring public frequencies, we are tasked with maintaining some of the most sensitive communication equipment aboard the Archer. Quite good. We enjoy all the standard benefits for Moral Inter forces on active duty assignments. Excellent healthcare, foreign service pay, a fully funded pension system. Oh, it's fine. Yes, of course. There is no higher calling than serving humanity. 6 weeks paid leave, bilingual childcare, vocational certification credits. Really, it's quite a good career. Then, you would like being on an anesthetic. There's always something that must be done. Oh, yes. We could always use more time off. Of course, serving on a Collision warship does require some personal sacrifices. But we have to be willing to make them if we believe in the mission. Nothing remarkable. Really, we have been very fortunate. But We do sometimes wonder what we might be missing out on, like in Messina. Yes, of course. There is no higher calling than serving humanity. But now, we have gotten quite far afield. What was the request? That's difficult to say. We have a very particular view from our observation platform up here. Perhaps the best way to describe it is to say we have a very wide perspective, but not an especially detailed one. Oh, it looks quite lovely from here. From our portal, we see rolling hillsides, a public park filled with grand oak trees, men and women going about on horses. Ah, that must be. We have only recently been detailed to the Archer, so we are still learning the names of all the many districts. We cannot say for certain. East it must be. We have only recently been detailed to the Archer, so we are still learning the names of all the many districts. Perhaps you are in a different part of the city? We have only recently been detailed to the Archer, so we are still learning the names of all the many districts. Martinez. That is to the west, yes? Stand by a moment. We are adjusting our viewfinder. Hold on. We are adjusting our viewfinder. To the south. Let us see. But to the north is all water. Yes. We are looking at the river now. There are small islands in the middle of it. It's very nice, actually. We are looking at the great river now. This must be the Esperance. It's very nice, actually. No, that cannot be right. That way is only Sprawl. We were under the impression that Martinez was nearer to the bay. Interesting. The west of the city looks very different from the east. There's a large motorway dividing it nearly in half. This must be the 881, no? Ah, we see. You're playing a practical joke. Very funny. Enough jokes, then. What was the request? Very well. Now, we're looking at an area that seems to be in urgent need of revitalization. It appears to go on for quite a while. There's a heavily industrialized district that seems to abut Montmartin. Really? It seems quite important. It may be the largest road in the city. But now we seem to be quite turned about. We'll have to consult a map in the future. Now, was there something else? Now we see the lake, and around that, a rather vibrant-looking city quarter. There are some large buildings, from the turn of the century, we would guess. Yes, this must be the heart of the district. So that is Martinez. It is quite striking, compared to where we're from. There are a great many destroyed buildings, still. And we don't see any horses. It's really nothing like the eastern side of the city. Oh, well, we see the many, historic buildings, of course. And the snow gathering along the rim of the bay. But what's most striking are the people. We don't even know how to say it. There are also a number of seabirds looping and twisting in the wind below us. No horses, though. And of course, we can see some people, but how to say it? We really couldn't say. That's one of the limits of this vantage. But the whole district does have a very desperate character. There are people who say that, but we've never felt that way. To us, they look like miniature figures, the kind you see in modern train sets. But this is a very sad train set. Perhaps we do not generally reach for such evocative imagery, but there is something rather desperate about them. But it's not all bad. We must say, there's not nearly as much tear lying about as we had been led to believe. And then, there's all the tear lying about. It's very unpleasant to look at. We're going to widen our viewfinder a bit. What a difference a few well-designed market incentives can make. And of course, it is important for the RCM to set an example. Yes, recycling is very important. The coalition always supports initiatives that promote civic responsibility and mindfulness. A roundabout. Yes, we see the monument. But there seems to be a man on top of it? Strange. We see the roundabout and the monument, but the horse seems to be missing its head. And there's a man on top of it? To be completely honest, officer, we are not in a position to say. We can't really make out faces from this distance. To be completely honest, detective, we are not in a position to say. We can't really make out faces from this distance. To be completely honest, Lieutenant, we are not in a position to say. We can't really make out faces from this distance. To be completely honest, Firewalker, we are not in a position to say. We can't really make out faces from this distance. From here, all we can really see are his enormous mutton chops. Perhaps he's some sort of motorcyclist? From here, all we can really see are his pale cheeks. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. In any event, thank you for this tour of Revachol West. It has certainly been educational. How curious. You learn the most interesting things on this sort of assignments. In any event, thank you for this tour of Revachol West. It has certainly been educational. That's you. We have to say, that's extremely irregular, officer. What are you doing on top of the public monument? That's you. We have to say, that's extremely irregular, detective. What are you doing on top of the public monument? That's you. We have to say, that's extremely irregular, Lieutenant. What are you doing on top of the public monument? That's you. We have to say, that's extremely irregular, Firewalker. What are you doing on top of the public monument? How interesting. In Messina, disco has been extinct for more than a decade. Funny how the past always is more present in some parts of the world. Interesting. We don't know much about Revacholian art, so you'll have to forgive our ignorance. That must be a Martinez custom. You'll have to forgive our ignorance. We are still relatively new here. It must be. Unfortunately, we don't have time to hear it just now. In any event, it is certainly interesting to see you, even from afar. Most of the time, we signalers just have to imagine what our interlocutors look like. A very important question with a very simple answer. We want humanity to endure. Immeasurable. It includes interstellar travel, 3 scientific revolutions, humanism, internationalism, the welfare state, and balance of terror theory. Nothing less than the intellectual foundation of our modern order. She was the greatest innocence, the single most consequential being to have ever lived. Her legacy touches every aspect of modern life. Oh, incomparably so. But that isn't what made her so remarkable. The role of the Moralist International is twofold: to buy humanity sufficient time to perfect itself, and to patiently guide it along the road while protecting it from ideological highwaymen and eschatologists. She was the greatest innocence, the single most consequential being to have ever lived. Her legacy touches every aspect of modern life. Yes, it does. It's the name of a bird, of course, but it's also the designation for the Archer's Coordinated Impact Artillery System. Why do you ask? Oh, yes. The bird watching here is very lovely. We saw a pair of great skuas on the wing earlier today. It is one of the most advanced currently in service, capable of firing 50 rounds per minute along 20 co-aligned arcs. Yes, names tend to do that, don't they? However you feel about weaponry as such, it is one of the great technical achievements of the modern era. Acknowledged. To reach the committee, all you need to do is fill out the appropriate request form and submit it to the liaison for public affairs. If the liaison accepts your request, you will be invited to address the committee at their next quarterly public hearing. We believe the next hearing is scheduled for July. Not a problem. If this is a time-sensitive matter, you may file an emergency address request with the liaison for public affairs. They typically respond within a few weeks. We're afraid that is quite impossible, Officer Sunset. We're afraid that is quite impossible, Detective Cousteau. We're afraid that is quite impossible, Lieutenant Dubois. We're afraid that is quite impossible, Firewalker. We cannot transfer you to the committee because we are not entrusted with that responsibility. We are simply the second signaler. That is the nature of the command pyramid, yes. Most modern organizations work in a similar way, even the RCM. You know, that is simply not how the command pyramid works. We can no more overrule our chief signaler than you could overrule your own precinct captain. We are here, officer, though we have to say this is all quite out of sequence. We are here, detective, though we have to say this is all quite out of sequence. We're here, Lieutenant, though we have to say this is all quite out of sequence. We're here, Firewalker, though we have to say this is all quite out of sequence. What? How do you know this? Officer, this is a very serious claim. Please describe the situation as succinctly as possible. We will forward your summary to the committee. Detective Cousteau, this is a very serious claim. Please describe the situation as succinctly as possible. We will forward your summary to the committee. Lieutenant Dubois, this is a very serious claim. Please describe the situation as succinctly as possible. We will forward your summary to the committee. Walker, this is a very serious claim. Please describe the situation as succinctly as possible. We will forward your summary to the committee. We need to know more than that. Now, please describe the situation in as much detail as you can. We will forward our summary to the committee. What's your tone? Now, please describe the situation in as much detail as you can. We will forward our summary to the committee. Please continue. We're listening. Yes? Please continue. Yes? What else? Good God. Is there anything else the committee should know? We have it. Is there anything else the committee should know? Was there anything else the committee should know? We are listening. What did you learn about the victim? Come again, Officer Sunset. You're saying the victim was killed by communists. Was this a politically motivated homicide? Come again, Detective Cousteau. You're saying the victim was killed by communists. Was this a politically motivated homicide? Come again, Lieutenant Dubois. You're saying the victim was killed by communists. Was this a politically motivated homicide? Come again, Walker. You're saying the victim was killed by communists. Was this a politically motivated homicide? Acknowledged. But there's still something we don't understand. Did you speak with the victim before his death? We're afraid we're not following. Did you speak with the victim before his death? Come again, Officer Sunset. You're saying that the victim was killed in some sort of romantic imbroglio? Come again, Detective Cousteau. You're saying that the victim was killed in some sort of romantic imbroglio? Come again, Lieutenant Dubois. You're saying that the victim was killed in some sort of romantic imbroglio? Come again, Walker. You're saying that the victim was killed in some sort of romantic imbroglio? Come again. Something miraculous, you say? We're afraid we aren't quite following. Who told you all this exactly? No, officer, we did not. No, detective, we did not. No, lieutenant, we did not. No, Walker, we did not. Officer, can you... What do you mean? Detective, can you... What do you mean? Lieutenant, can you... What do you mean? Walker, can you... What do you mean? Please acknowledge. What do you mean the world is going to end? And what did it say exactly? We're afraid that won't be possible, officer. We're afraid that won't be possible, detective. We're afraid that won't be possible, lieutenant. We're afraid that won't be possible, Walker. And how do you know this? We see. Officer, we must be perfectly honest with you. We cannot recommend that you address the committee, not under the present circumstances at least. Detective, we must be perfectly honest with you. We cannot recommend that you address the committee, not under the present circumstances at least. Lieutenant, we must be perfectly honest with you. We cannot recommend that you address the committee, not under the present circumstances at least. Walker, we must be perfectly honest with you. We cannot recommend that you address the committee, not under the present circumstances at least. Because you're speaking like someone in the throes of a serious drug addiction. Your words have no connection to reality. You don't need to speak with the committee. You need to speak with your station lazaret, immediately. Because what you're saying makes no sense. From the sound of your voice, it appears that you have been under the influence of alcohol. It is our recommendation that you speak with your station lazaret immediately about treatment options. Because what you're saying suggests that you are experiencing an acute psychic break with reality. You don't need to speak with the committee. You need to speak with your station lazaret immediately. We will pass along a summary of your report, minus any speculative or paranatural elements. What the committee does from there is beyond our control. Acknowledged. Please stand by while we transmit our summary to the committee. Officer Sunset, this is collision Warship Archer. Please acknowledge. Detective Cousteau, this is collision Warship Archer. Please acknowledge. Lieutenant Dubois, this is collision Warship Archer. Please acknowledge. Walker, This is Collision Warship Archer. Please acknowledge. We have transmitted our summary to the Committee of Responsibility. Please continue standing by. Officer Sunset, this is Archer. Are you there? Detective Cousteau, this is Archer. Are you there? Lieutenant Dubois, this is Archer. Are you there? Firewalker, this is Archer. Are you there? Thank you for standing by. We are authorized to report the Committee of Responsibility for Rebasho has acknowledged and accepted your request. They would like you to address your matter to the committee directly, as their earliest convenience. Subito. Collision Shuttle Laurel is setting a course for your position. They will arrive momentarily. Stand by. Remain where you are. Collision Shuttle Laurel is setting a course for your position. They will arrive momentarily. Stand by. Local matters can wait. Collision Shuttle Laurel is setting a course for your position. They will arrive momentarily. Stand by. We are sorry, Officer Sunset. The committee has declined your request for an emergency address. We are sorry, Detective Cousteau. The committee has declined your request for an emergency address. We are sorry, Lieutenant Dubois. The committee has declined your request for an emergency address. We are sorry, Firewalker. The committee has declined your request for an emergency address. Specifically, they said that disputes of purely local concern do not fall under their purview. I cannot say we agree, speaking for a moment in strictly personal terms. You have convinced us that the situation in Martinez is untenable, but we are only the second signaler, and there is no appeal in the committee's decision. They added that they expect the RCM to fulfill its responsibilities to a high degree of satisfaction. That is correct. We do sincerely hope you seek treatment for your condition. You appear to be an extremely diligent detective, and the RCM, well, it cannot afford to lose such assets. We wish you good fortune and safety during the course of your work. We're afraid so, but we must say that it has been a privilege to speak with you. You've shown yourself to be a credit to the RCM, and we wish you good fortune and safety during the course of your work. That's correct. But we must say that it has been interesting to speak with you. If nothing else, the RCM is frequently a source of curiosity to those of us aboard the Archer. You're welcome. We must say that it has been interesting to speak with you. If nothing else, the RCM is frequently a source of curiosity to those of us aboard the Archer. Now, the first signaler has informed us that we must update the receiving frequency. This connection will be cleared in 4, 3... Officer Sunset, this is Collision Warship Archer. We have been instructed to inform you that the Laurel arrived at your position. Please acknowledge. Detective Cousteau, this is Collision Warship Archer. We have been instructed to inform you that the Laurel arrived at your position. Please acknowledge. Lieutenant Dubois, this is Collision Warship Archer. We have been instructed to inform you that the Laurel arrived at your position. Please acknowledge. Firewalker, this is Collision Warship Archer. We have been instructed to inform you that the Laurel arrived at your position. Please acknowledge. Thank you. The Committee of Responsibility for Rebasho has authorized us to offer you an immediate extraction. Do you accept? Repeat that, officer. What do you mean, you can't? Are you being impeded in some way? Repeat that, detective. What do you mean, you can't? Are you being impeded in some way? Repeat that, lieutenant. What do you mean, you can't? Are you being impeded in some way? Repeat that, Firewalker. What do you mean, you can't? Are you being impeded in some way? We are far past that point, officer. There is only one question now. Are you ready, or are you not? We are far past that point, detective. There is only one question now. Are you ready, or are you not? We are far past that point, lieutenant. There is only one question now. Are you ready, or are you not? We are far past that point, Firewalker. There is only one question now. Are you ready, or are you not? Acknowledged. Laurel has initiated the extraction procedure. Stand by. Your case. We aren't sure you understand. The committee is waiting for you. You have to tell them what you've uncovered. The stakes here are much greater than any individual case. We can assure you your partner will carry on just fine. That is his responsibility, just as this is yours. Now, there's no time to waste. The committee is waiting to hear what you've uncovered. Personal business. We aren't sure you understand. The committee is waiting for you. You have to tell them what you've uncovered about The stakes here are much greater than any personal business you may be working through. We ask you one more time. Are you prepared to accept your responsibility? We have to say, this is extremely disappointing to hear, officer. We have to say, this is extremely disappointing to hear, detective. We have to say, this is extremely disappointing to hear, lieutenant. We have to say, this is extremely disappointing to hear, fireworker. What the consequences will be for your refusal to accept responsibility, we cannot say. For your sake, we pray they are not more than we all can bear. And now, we are updating our frequencies. We will not speak again. This connection will be cleared in 4, 3... We will hear your request, Officer Sunset. Although we must inform you that the committee does not typically intervene in personal matters. We will hear your request, Detective Cousteau. Although we must inform you that the committee does not typically intervene in personal matters. We will hear your request, Lieutenant Dubois. Although we must inform you that the committee does not typically intervene in personal matters. We will hear your request, Fireworker. Although we must inform you that the committee does not typically intervene in personal matters. We are not sure we heard that clearly. Are you suggesting that you may be responsible for the very murder you're investigating? Officer, surely you are aware that it is a civil offense to maliciously or frivolously obstruct a collision radio frequency. Detective, surely you are aware that it is a civil offense to maliciously or frivolously obstruct a collision radio frequency. Lieutenant, surely you are aware that it is a civil offense to maliciously or frivolously obstruct a collision radio frequency. Fireworker, surely you are aware that it is a civil offense to maliciously or frivolously obstruct a collision radio frequency. Please confirm. Are you saying your partner is somehow impeding your investigation? Now, please excuse us while we update the receiving frequency. This connection will be cleared in 4, 3... We are not sure we understand. To what end are you referring? So, you're experiencing acute memory loss. We don't see how this is the committee's business. We're afraid we don't understand. Are you requesting medical attention? Then we are not sure what assistance can be rendered. This is quite beyond the purview of the committee of responsibility. Then we recommend you speak with your station lazaret. This has nothing to do with the committee of responsibility. We're afraid we don't understand at all. What does this something have to do with your lost memory? We are sorry to hear of your loss, but personal tragedy is quite beyond the purview of the committee of responsibility. Unfortunately, we cannot accept your request. We really have no idea what you're talking about, but we are quite sure it is beyond the purview of the committee of responsibility. 2, 1, après le monde, le gris. It's an elegant idea, one of the cornerstones of the modern era. In short, it holds that durable, lasting peace is possible when the major powers are capable of inflicting unacceptable and irreversible destruction upon one another. Because no rational state is willing to accept the risk of such a calamity befalling its own people. All powers are incentivized to de-escalate conflicts before they reach the point of no return. A state is like any other living thing. It wants to survive and grow. A state that doesn't value its own existence is not a state at all. Good. First question. Are you currently in the vicinity of Surrey, the North Arcade Islands, or near Pale Offshore Platform in Sulindico? Please answer the question. Very good. Next question. Would you describe the phenomenon as internal to the Isola or external to the Isola? Answer the question, please. Next question. At the time, did you experience sense objects? Yes. Examples may include sound, memory, light. Final question. Were you alone? Let's go on. Never mind that. All you need to do is repeat what you just said. Acknowledge. Listen very carefully, officer. We're going to ask you a series of questions. It is imperative that you answer as directly and truthfully as you can. Do you understand? Acknowledge. Listen very carefully, detective. We're going to ask you a series of questions. It is imperative that you answer as directly and truthfully as you can. Do you understand? Acknowledged. Listen very carefully, Lieutenant. We're going to ask you a series of questions. It is imperative that you answer as directly and truthfully as you can. Do you understand? Acknowledged. Listen very carefully, Walker. We're going to ask you a series of questions. It is imperative that you answer as directly and truthfully as you can. Do you understand? We're afraid we must ask you to repeat that, Officer Sunset. We're afraid we must ask you to repeat that, Detective Cousteau. We're afraid we must ask you to repeat that, Lieutenant Dubois. We're afraid we must ask you to repeat that, Walker. Thank you, officer. Please stand by while we transmit our summary. Thank you, Detective. Please stand by while we transmit our summary. Thank you, Lieutenant. Please stand by while we transmit our summary. Thank you, Walker. Please stand by while we transmit our summary. Oh, it looks quite lovely from here, even with the rain. From our portal, we see rolling hillsides, a public park filled with grand oak trees, men and women going about on horses. Oh, it looks quite lovely from here. From our portal, we see rolling hillsides covered with snow, a public park filled with grand oak trees, men and women going about on horses. We're sorry we did not come bearing better news. But we must say that it has been a privilege to speak with you. We believe you are a credit to the RCM, and we wish you good fortune and safety during the course of your work. Officer, surely you are aware that it is a civil offense to maliciously or frivolously obstruct a collision radio frequency. Detective, surely you are aware that it is a civil offense to maliciously or frivolously obstruct a collision radio frequency. Lieutenant, surely you are aware that it is a civil offense to maliciously or frivolously obstruct a collision radio frequency. Walker, surely you are aware that it is a civil offense to maliciously or frivolously obstruct a collision radio frequency. Officer, surely you are aware that it is a civil offense to maliciously or frivolously obstruct a collision radio frequency. Walker, surely you are aware that it is a civil offense to maliciously or frivolously obstruct a collision radio frequency. Of course not. It's simply a rhetorical convention, a common synecdoche. We are the second signaler. We can assure you, it is coming as soon as possible. That's certainly possible. Though, of course, it depends on the contingencies. You must understand, the moral intern is responsible for ensuring the continuance and flourishing of mankind for the next 3,000 years. The planning division must account for a great many possible outcomes and chance events. Fortunately, we have contingency spreads to help guide our decision-making. Of course, there is no one spread that can reasonably account for all these possible events. But at least, we are able to prepare for the most likely eventualities. You're thinking about this metaphor too literally. It's not really our area of expertise, but we can try to explain. Picture a smooth hill made from fresh dirt. Now, if you stand atop this hill and pour a glass of water over it, what will happen? Precisamente. We know only that it will run down, but not what course it will take. If we place a rock in the water's path, will it divert to the left or to the right? We cannot say, but we may predict which way it might run in either event. The point is that we know only that the water will run down, but not what course it will take. If we place a rock in the water's path, will it divert to the left or to the right? We cannot say, but we may predict which way it might run in either event. That is the essence of the idea. You might also imagine these spreads as a kind of tree, with every juncture representing a different event, and every branch representing a different timeline. Not exactly. No one can know the future. But with contingency spreads, it is possible to predict what the future realities might reasonably look like. But we shouldn't overstate their importance. They are simply one of many tools used by the moral intern to set policy. Well, yes, just as some events are less probable than others. While we expect the vast majority of realities will fall within a normal confidence interval, there must necessarily be some that fall outside that range as well. Who are we to say? We are only a second signaler, not a metaphysician. This is the only reality we have ever known. So, how can we judge how reasonable it might be compared to any other? That's impossible to say. It may be that Revachol has a great role to play, or no role at all. That is the nature of contingencies. You must understand, When we speak of contingency spreads, we are talking about the most fantastically complex data visualization human beings are capable of producing, with thousands of events, from elections and wars to natural disaster or scientific miracles, and millions of possible outcomes. It's completely natural. Studies have shown that the untrained mind is only capable of considering so many possibilities in place at once, usually no more than 3 or 4. Almost certainly. Not many realize this, but the moral intern is constantly reviewing and revising its contingency spreads in order to improve our own decision-making. It may be the case that, under certain scenarios, Revachol is vitally important, as it was during the collision landings in '08. It may also be the case, in many other equally plausible scenarios, that Revachol is simply another once great city, like countless others throughout history. Only in the sense that the entire world has to wing its way through history. The moral intern simply aims to wing it as little as possible. Yes, we would say that is a fair and reasonable way to describe it. Perhaps, perhaps not. The world is full of great cities that have resolved the questions of their time. La Cherte, Bradford, our own home of Advesperachet. Perhaps, perhaps not. Could the Pericarnassians have foreseen the role Revachol would play in events to come? In truth, history only appears to rhyme because we cannot perceive events in their full complexity. But one must consider that the world was in the midst of a global catastrophe brought on by an unstoppable pandemic. No amount of contingency planning could account for all of that. Impossible to say for certain. Human beings are notoriously bad at predicting all the different ways events might unravel. For this reason, responsibility for developing contingency spreads is only assigned to highly trained analysts working with advanced radio computers and a steady supply of drumming. Of course, while the content of individual contingency spreads is deeply classified, many degrees beyond our access, everything we have heard from the Provisional Commission indicates that the transition is proceeding according to the appropriate timetable. Of course, the coalition supports the Revacholian people's desire for full democracy. We encourage you to contact the offices of the Provisional Commission if you're serious about getting involved. The first phase of democratization. Well, not yet. Right now, it's more like a simple seed, buried out of sight. Oh, there are many things you can do. If you're interested in learning how to canvass for signatures, manage the polling place, or register voters, the Commission would be more than happy to direct you to a workshop. Real democracy doesn't just happen. It requires the support of a great number of stable, interlocking institutions. That is the only way to channel popular sentiment into a legitimate mandate to govern. Otherwise, what are we left with? Esattamente. But the Commission's hard and diligent work may soon be bearing fruit. Revachol is nearly ready to begin the first phase of democratization. Well, that isn't very realistic, is it? Gardeners and lawyers are both essential to a beautiful and well-functioning society. But we are referring to something else. In most cases, the Provisional Council selects them from a cross-section of the local population to ensure the slates actually reflect the people they represent. The Council is modeled after similar bodies developed in a number of transitional democracies. Its role is to devise and shape the future institutions of Revacholian democracy, according to local conditions. Soon, the people of Revachol will vote for slates of candidates who will make up the Transitional Advisory Council that will oversee the second phase of democratization. Our best theoreticians believe that 3 to 5 phases are appropriate for states that lack strong democratic traditions, which would certainly apply to Revachol. In fact, you may have picked the perfect time to get involved. Revachol is nearly ready to begin the first phase of democratization. That's rather optimistic. Though, of course, it depends on the contingencies. Oh, most likely. Though, of course, it depends on the contingencies. It's even possible the cities that will resolve the questions of the future have not been founded yet. Acknowledged. We are at your disposal. Once elected, council members will even have the opportunity to join one of several officially sanctioned political wings, depending on their ideological beliefs and policy preferences. A very important question. The wings are carefully selected to represent a wide spectrum of political thought. Of course, such a situation is not ideal. We would all prefer for Revacholians to nominate the representatives directly. But that is why it's a transitional council. Even though we are only a second signaler, we can tell you with great certainty that there is no contingency spread for you. Officer Sunset. Even though we are only a second signaler, we can tell you with great certainty that there is no contingency spread for you. Detective Cousteau. Even though we are only a second signaler, we can tell you with great certainty that there is no contingency spread for you. Lieutenant Dubois. Even though we are only a second signaler, we can tell you with great certainty that there is no contingency spread for you. Walker. What you're describing is the attitude of a child. The moral intern is not humanity's stepmother, despite what some critics may allege. Responsibility and freedom are deeply entwined, and both are essential in a flourishing society. We are sorry, we are not familiar with all the local offices in Martinez. It is a work in progress, but it is also the best way that humanity has found thus far. Our concerns exist on the scale of decades, centuries, and millennia. Sometimes, we say the moral intern worries about the future so that normal people may worry about today. Perhaps you're confused as to the scale on which the contingency spreads function. Please understand, we are not some totalitarian enterprise. We are committed to and bound by the highest values of individual freedom and opportunity. Of course not. The moral intern is committed to giving every person the opportunity to flourish. The moral intern is not sale. There is no secret vault of files between Isherwood or Lacherte or anywhere else, because that is not the moral intern's purpose. Of course, we are only a second signaler, not a metaphysician. We sometimes find it overwhelming also. It may be. We are only a second signaler, not a metaphysician. It's a rather cold way to think about the world, isn't it? The key, we believe, is to be open to meaning, even amidst great uncertainty. But now we are only speaking for ourselves. We are living in the only reality we know. Our task is to make the best of it that we can. Typically, there's a liberal technocratic wing, a social democratic wing, and even a conservative populist wing. You wouldn't believe some of the ideas they express, but a vibrant and free political culture requires that all perspective be given voice, even those many may find objectionable. Simply, that there is no such thing as an individual contingency spread. It was established by many of the same founding party members who elected Dolores Day, and who, after her assassination, dedicated their lives to the continuation of their political and intellectual project. There are many. The communists say they are the next dialectical step in an inexorable spiral of progress. They claim to have resolved the inherent contradictions of moralism, and believe they're just one revolution away from establishing a humanist paradise. The fascists say they are both the ancestors of and the successors to Deloreanism. In other words, they believe that Dolores Day's reign simply represents a glorious phase of expansion within a greater Franco-Nigerian heritage. They criticize the DeLorean project for accepting and integrating new peoples rather than forcefully subjugating them. And then, there are our prodigal cousins, the Vazan Social Democrats, who hold our same values and have even adopted many of our same rights and iconography, though they persist in rejecting the umbrella of moralism. If you believe so strongly in your own destiny that the rest of reality exists only as a word reflection of it, how can it be contradicted? Many political theorists have argued that communism accepts the logic of DeLorean humanism while abandoning its spirit. They offer a cautionary tale, in other words, about attempting to found a paradise atop bones and ashes. Yes, atomic war, environmental degradation, resource exhaustion, viral pandemic, supervolcanism, runaway anthropogenetic collapse. We don't resent them. It's more that we are disappointed that they have chosen to emphasize certain points of dispute over broad areas of accord. And therein lies their danger. They feel true without being true. But it's a delicate and very complicated subject. And of course, every belief system has something to recommend it. But of course, they also remain dependable partners in a number of centrist governing coalitions, about 3,000 years. Of course, the number 3,000 represents the average of a great number of projections. The actual number might be closer to 2,800, or even 2,750, depending on the contingencies. It is, in all senses, the most moderate and reasonable projection possible based on current science. It does, doesn't it? And yet, there remains a great deal to be done in that span. Viewed from that perspective, we are nearly 3/4 of the way there. That depends on how you look at it. Since the Pericarnassian incident, there have been nearly 8,000 years of recorded history. Of course, the number 3,000 represents the average of a great number of projections. The actual number might be closer to 3,250 or even 3,300, depending on the contingencies. It is possible. We grew up there. We have seen the lattice with our own eyes. In Messina, of course. Not only was it the site of Dolores Day's crowning, it was also one of the great cities of the Dolorian era, a glorious expression of humanity's highest potential. She was. There are even those who say that at Vesperace it summoned Dolores Day, or that it was built in preparation for her, centuries before her arrival. That's why the old town is sometimes called the ceremonial heart of humanity. Of course, such a city does not spring from nowhere, nor does it endure without effort. Its construction was the work of many generations, and its preservation is an equally monumental responsibility. Let us answer your question with a question. Have you ever seen evening fall over the old town of Vesperace? If you had, then you would remember. It is one of the great wonders of the world, impossible to mistake or forget. The heart of the city, the old town, is a district composed of weathered marble, comprising thousands of columns and arcades arranged around a series of grand plazas. During the day, it's a beautiful sight, equal to any of the great cities of Pericarnassus. But as the sun sets, the shadows cast by those columns and arcades weave together to form an intricate ombre lattice. When you see it, you suddenly understand. It was all built for you, for this very moment. Not only that, but you are also part of that centuries-long plan. When you cross one of the open plazas, your own shadows is effortlessly woven into the great lattice work, a deliberate synthesis of humanity, art, and the natural world. The RCM exists under the umbrella of the coalition, just as the coalition exists under the umbrella of the Morale Interne. Officer Sunset, was there anything else? Detective Cousteau, was there anything else? Lieutenant Dubois, was there anything else? Walker, was there anything else? At the same time, the RCM is not exactly off the coalition. We are not that familiar with RCM lore and practice, but we believe that may be the case. As we recall, the decomptage originated with the Revacholian commune itself. It's our understanding that the RCM's organizational structure predates the coalition. We believe it may even be modeled after the communal brigades themselves. Of course, this is history you're talking about. But in a practical sense, it's the responsibility of the ethics divisions to ensure that both organizations are working towards the same ends. History is a river coursing ever downward. Occasionally, its course is redirected in mysterious and unexpected ways. One now committed to upholding moralist values. Strange, isn't it? Because the coalition has no interest in running Revachol. We'll succeed in our own mission the moment Revachol rejoins the international community as a sovereign democracy. The RCM is an integral piece of that project. Officer Sunset, are you still there? Detective Cousteau, are you still there? Lieutenant Dubois, are you still there? Walker, are you still there? Yes, it is. We grew up there. We have seen the lattice with our own eyes. Extremely different. We knew there were still parts of Revachol that have not fully recovered from the revolution. But here, the destruction is quite evident, even compared to the eastern side of the city. For the most part, it has. The world is certainly not free of violent conflict. But in the modern era, we have made great strides to reduce its frequency, duration, and severity. But we must stress that real democracy is an ongoing process and not simply an outcome. It must be cultivated and preserved if it is to endure. Esattamente. Beyond that, it may be said that we are the inheritors and stewards of Dolores Day's legacy. This is why it is critical for the international community to work toward peace and cooperation between nations. There's simply too much at stake. Well, it's rather dark now, but from our portal we can just make out the rolling hillsides. We can see the lanterns lining the walkways through a public park. Is everything alright? We lost the connection for a moment. Officer Sunset, are you there? Lieutenant Dubois, are you there? Is everything alright? We lost the connection for a moment. Walker, are you there? Detective Cousteau, are you there? Detective Cousteau, are you there? Lieutenant Dubois, are you there? Walker, are you there? Come again? We're picking up more interference. Is everything alright? There are a few people on horses by a small pond. The homes and gardens are quite beautiful. Very near like those in certain areas of Messina. There are children building a snowman by a small pond. The homes and gardens are quite beautiful, very near, like those in certain areas of Messina. There are children running home to get out of the rain. The homes and gardens are quite beautiful, very near, like those in certain areas of Messina. There are children playing by a small pond. The homes and gardens are quite beautiful, very near, like those in certain areas of Messina. No, well, not quite. The Model Inter never intends to violate another nation's sovereignty. That would be a serious violation of international law. We repeat, were you alone by thousands of people over many centuries, in keeping with a precise plan each believed in, but never expected to see the final completion of. For you, for all of humanity, what the consequences will be for your refusal to accept responsibility, we cannot say. For your sake, we pray they are not more than we all can bear.